Since the beginning of time, human beings have been asking the same questions. What is the meaning of life? Where did we come from? And where are we going to? Ever since that time, we have been moved by the yearning for something that exceeds our grasp. Where human beings reach the limits of their understanding, where the nameless begins, that is where they suppose God to be. In all the ages past, people have tried to follow their inklings of the beyond, to search for this wonder, a path back to the center of all existence, a path to the origin of all creation. This yearning has never ceased to exist. But today we are caught up in the hustle and bustle of our daily lives, and many of us can hardly perceive our innermost self. Life in the Western industrialized nations is marked to an ever-increasing extent by violence and inhumanity, and we are confronted by problems that we can no longer cope with. Here it seems as though God has ceased to exist, whereas in the Eastern societies he still plays a major role. Is it because these people are poor? India is a poor country, poor at least in material terms. The people are modest and enduring. For centuries they have been oppressed and exploited, but endure thanks to their absolutely unbending belief in God's will. Mahatma Gandhi once said of India that its spiritual heritage consists of the simple life and the noble thinking of its people. Wanderers find countless temples and holy places, places for contemplation and meditation. Many people from the West too have gone to India because they have realized that material prosperity could not make them happy. Madras is the fourth largest city of the subcontinent and more relaxed than the cities of the north. The climate is already tropical. Here they follow a daily ritual, an early morning walk. And among all the walkers we also find the man whose path and purpose in life are the focus of this film. Parthasarathi Rajagopalachari was born in 1927, the first son of a respected Brahmin family. After studying in Calcutta and Benares, he ultimately became a sales manager in one of India's largest industrial companies. He got to know Europe on business trips, starting in the early 50s. In 1964, he met Shri Chandra, a great spiritual teacher who led a quiet, secluded life in northern India, with a small circle of disciples. Rajagopalachari accompanied his master for many years. Before leaving this life, Ramchandra appointed Parthasarathi as his successor. The one-time disciple became the spiritual master himself. Rajagopalachari lives together with his family under a single roof. People come from all over the world to meet Parthasarathi, or Chari as he is affectionately called, and to appeal to him for help. Not an easy task to inherit. As a rule, the people are initially looking for guidance in regard to their personal problems. Spirituality is something that has remained to a large extent unknown, especially in the Western cultures, and is often confused with religion or philosophy.
All religions preach that there can be only one God, but each religion says the God of that religion is the only God and the true God. Therefore, they have tried to convert people to their religion. In spirituality, we have no God with a name, no God with a form, no God with attributes. It is an abstraction, the abstraction of the ultimate potential to which a human being can rise. This we call spirituality.
This type of yoga is called Sahaj Marg in Hindi, which can be translated as simple way, a spiritual path that is followed in the midst of daily life. This meditation leads not to withdrawal from the world, but to a more realistic approach to life, even though the goal remains the highest goal aspired to by yoga since time immemorial, namely the rediscovery of one's own divine origin. When Chari met Ramchandra for the first time, he was surprised about the simple life that the old man led. Ramchandra, who was called Babuji by his disciples, lived all his life in Shahjahanpur, a small, somewhat poor city in the northern state of Uttar Pradesh. Chandra was in turn a disciple of a master, Lalaji, who lived in a neighboring village. At that time there was only a small group of disciples. But for Chari, that first meeting with Babuji was rather a shock.
So that first visit, a shock, I think was a necessary shock. Because had he been all that I expected him to be, I would have been very complacent. It would have been something which matched my expectation. But the very fact that he was totally opposite to what I expected, physically, mentally, everything. And his house was a disaster. A tumbled down, old, rickety place, full of dust, filth, flies, mosquitoes by night. I mean, I don't know how I stood that for 2 days. But those 2 days made me, because it brought me to a sense of reality. So in that sense, that first shock was, I think, the best training I received from him. Then, of course, I sort of fell in love with the old man, and the rest is everywhere.
It is this love that continues to support Parthasarathi even today, and that gives him the strength he needs to continue in his master's footsteps. The once small group of disciples has meanwhile grown to number about almost 25,000 members around the world. Chari himself still takes care of the major portion of the administration work and the correspondence with hundreds of centers around the globe. The office in the second story of his house is equipped with all the machines a modern office needs: computer, copier, telefax. He also writes books and keeps tabs on the construction of various ashrams, one of which is being built right before the doors of the city in Manapakam, a short distance south of Madras. Here, on an 11-acre plot of land, an ashram planned jointly by Indian and European architects is coming into being. The word ashram means a place of retreat, a place where one can go for introspection and contemplation. It is also a place to spend time with one's spiritual guide. The most important, here one can meditate. The goal of yoga is the reunification with the divine. India has long been the home of different types of yoga, the three main ones being Jnana Yoga, the way of knowledge, Karma Yoga, the way of action, or Bhakti Yoga, the way of love. Sahaj Marg is one form of Raja Yoga.
The most important is Raja Yoga, where we deal with the mind. The theory being that it is with the mind that we interact with this world, with this universe. And whatever goes wrong with the mind goes wrong in its action, subsequent action, and everything goes wrong with the result. So by regulating the mind, we can regulate our lives, and by regulating our lives, we can regulate our destination.
Meditation is the act of orienting oneself towards a specific goal. Although there are different forms of meditation, the process is in fact always the same. The various schools of meditation differ only in their orientation, that is to say, in what they aim for. In Sahaj Marg, the aim is towards the Absolute, or God. Since the Absolute is beyond all forms, the presence of the Absolute is thought to be a subtle light, a light without illumination in the heart.
Following the old prescription that we become what we meditate upon. If you meditate on stone, you become stone. If you meditate on love, you become love. If you meditate on God, you become God. But the absolute God, without any conceptual possibilities, is difficult to meditate upon. So my master said, He is present in the heart of everything. He must be in your heart too. His presence sheds divine effulgence, as we call it. What he used to say, light without luminosity.
The essential feature of Sahaj Marg is the transmission. This is accomplished by the master who transmits divine essence from the center of his own heart into the heart of the disciple, or abhyasi in Sanskrit. This transmission of divine essence, which is called pranahuti, is supported through daily cleaning.
Secondly, there is the system of cleaning, as we call it, which I have not found in the literature in any religion yet. By that, we are able to get rid of all what we call samskaras of the past, which we have accumulated by thoughts and actions, because every thought leaves an impression. Similarly, actions. Commonly you can have this experience that if you see something very tragic going on, it makes such an impression on your mind that you cannot get rid of it for sometimes months and years. Here it is cleaned off. It's as if you have a slate and you just wipe it clean with a wet rag. Now what is cleaning? We sit in a similar posture in the evening, comfortably, and imagine that all the day's accumulations, good, bad and indifferent, it doesn't matter what, are being washed out by His grace from behind us as smoke or vapor. It's a process of suggestion. And my master used to emphasize that you have to apply the will to this process. It is like when you have a jet of air and you want to wash out a vessel, you have to apply it in such a way that the air jet will be forced inside and will clean out the inside. If you are just playing it up here, the vessel here is not going to get clean. So we have to give a direction to this with our will force and positively imagine everything going out, and you will feel that you are much lighter at the end of the process. Here this transmission and the cleaning adjust themselves to each other so that you are progressively cleaner and progressively stronger. It's like climbing up, 1 foot here, 1 foot there, 1 foot here, 1 foot there, each leg supporting the weight of the body till the leg is in place. So as the purity proceeds, the efficacy of the transmission to elevate you becomes faster and faster. It is like that famous equation in physics, for instance, acceleration as opposed to velocity.
Just as a bird can fly only by using both of his wings, the life of a human being consists of two aspects, the material and the spiritual. Both should be harmonized. One of the main concerns of the Master is that mankind should live in harmony with nature, because all life is one, a truth taught by the wise men and saints of all ages. The effects of our disregard of nature and our unrestrained exploitation of its resources are becoming ever more painfully clear. This is why part of ashram life is devoted to the cultivation of plants, fruits and vegetables. Even though an ashram is intended primarily for meditation, it cannot exist without cooperative work. There are no fees in Sahaj Marg, but people who wish can make donations to support the work of the mission. For a few rupees, one can eat and drink in the ashram. Nothing fancy, just the basics. Many abhyasis bring their families, their children and their friends. Parthasarathi himself spends a large part of his time at the ashram with his family. Here he is speaking with his wife Sulojana. All the obligations relating to family and profession, the tasks and responsibilities we've taken on in our lives are part of the learning process. Meditation is not to be considered a way of fleeing from life. Our souls evolve through the external conditions of daily living, and it is the difficulties in particular from which we learn and grow the most. Spirituality says that problems should not be seen as obstacles, but as opportunities for growth. In Sahaj Marg, we experience that the strength we need to deal with difficult and painful situations is always available within ourselves. In meditation, we attempt to become still and thoughtless in order to free ourselves from the impressions and illusions of this world and to experience the essence, the divine presence within. By becoming free of thoughts and impressions, the mind regains its pristine state beyond time and space. Because it is the attachments in our lives that prevent us from unfolding our true spiritual potential.
Now we are reacting to everything. We are reacting to our desires, we are reacting to our needs, we are reacting to our higher aspirations, if we have any. So there's a sort of a pull in three directions. So what happens, in mathematics, when there are pulls from different directions, the body remains there if the pulls are equal. There is no progress in any direction. If one is stronger, well, there's a slight progress towards that direction. No, these are all on one plane. The physical, the existential plane. No, we have to go this way. So what happens? These pulls must go, and then this weakest of forces. See, yesterday we were discussing That gravity is called the weak force, and yet it holds the universe together. Whereas the thing which binds the molecules and the atoms together is called the strong force, but and it's gone. It has no more strength. Its strength is over distances which are called, quantum distances, like 10 to the power of -6 of a centimeter or a millimeter. No distance at all, physically speaking. But it is a strong force within those distances only. But this weak force is holding an enormous universe which you think of in terms of 20 billion light years in diameter. And this weak force is holding it. No, the weaker or weakest force is the spiritual force, the pull from above, which lasts life after life. If you don't obey it this life, you have to obey it the next life. Or the next, or the next. Spirituality does not bother, you see, about your life. Because as Babuji used to say, if they don't come now, they will come in next life or after 4 lives, but they have to come. Why? Because that powerful force is there.
To escape from the eternal wheel of life, one needs the help of a spiritual guide. Only someone who has himself covered the whole distance with all of its pitfalls is capable of guiding others. In the Sahaj Marg tradition, the disciple is linked with the master primarily in thought, which is referred to as constant remembrance. In this heart-to-heart link with the divine being of the master, the disciple experiences his own inner divinity, just as a lover remembers the beloved.
So, you see, the beauty of this is, by forgetting ourselves, we remember him. Or as Babuji says, remember him and you forget everything else. No, this remembrance focuses your attention, concentration, devotion, everything on that one point. Now you are responsible only to that, which means automatically you are passive to everything else. So we don't surrender in that sense. You see, surrender happens when everything else is focused towards this one point. Surrender happens by itself.
In ancient writings, it is said that a true master is like a door through which the divine comes into this world, and through which we can step to find our way back to infinity, beyond the limits of the material world. Lao Tzu said that the influence of a sage penetrates our subconscious like a root penetrates the cracks of a boulder. This is the step-by-step enlightenment, he says, which helps us gradually to perceive the spiritual mysteries during our journey. Intentional efforts to influence other people violate their spiritual sphere. A good example enters gently and influences the people in the proper way. Chari's positive effect on people is clearly evidenced by the large number of disciples who visit him day after day to ask his advice, and they are often so demanding that he has to set very clear limits in order to maintain his personal sphere. Even then, it is only for a short time, because soon there are again 20 or 30 people sitting in his room in the wing of the ashram. People with widely varying concerns of completely different origin, language and culture, yet each in his own way a seeker, and each receives his answer.
Liberation, realization, layavastha तीन है अपने में. मैं agree. आप धर्म में हिंदू धर्मशास्त्र के अनुसार एक ही है मुक्ति.
According to spiritual law, it is the master who selects the disciple, instead of the disciple finding his master. When a person is ready to embark upon the spiritual journey, the teachings of the wise attract the seeker to the master for instruction. In earlier times, spiritual seekers sometimes traveled about for years, often as beggars, living in poverty and renunciation. Because India is a poor country and the social structures do not permit much mobility, in our case, the master himself takes to the road to visit his followers in the various centers. It is important to him to reach even very isolated areas of the subcontinent and to maintain contact with his disciples. Even in the age of the jet, he accepts the strain of having to travel by train or car for several days. Twice each year, big celebrations are held on the birthdays of the two masters, Lalaji and Babuji, always in different Indian cities, once in the north, then in the south or in central India. Sometimes more than 5,000 people from all over the world come together to celebrate and meditate. There are people of more than 20 different nationalities assembled here. They say it is a unique experience when 5,000 people meditate together, a condition that is difficult to describe and that changes aversion to mass events into a feeling of unity. This is what cooking for 5,000 people looks like in India. Simple, but homemade and delicious. Here you will search in vain for meat-filled pots. The food should be simple, because the things we eat also have a very specific vibration that has an effect upon us. This is prasad, a sweet which will be blessed by the master and endowed with a strong spiritual vibration, making it a food for both body and soul. Even if the creature comforts are sometimes lacking at such mass events, the scenery is often of surpassing beauty. For example, in the palace of a Maharaja, as was the case in Jaipur. Or here in a castle in Bangalore. There is no spiritual law which says that we should give away our riches and go about in rags. On the contrary, we should experience well-being both internally and externally. Only if we cling to our possessions and make ourselves dependent upon them out of fear or greed, do we become their slaves. The spiritual path shows us that all the beauty of this world is subject to the law of change, and thus only transient, and that only the essence continues to exist without end. This is why our true potential is limited by our thinking in terms of concepts and goals, especially by our Western ideas about success and results.
So every record, every goal which is specifiable in terms of space and time limits our endeavors. Also, naturally, it limits our achievements. What have you achieved after all? Just breaking a target, breaking your head. So the wisdom of Sahaj Marg says, no more of this foolishness. Infinity is your goal. Where is it? At the end of infinity. What is it? Infinity itself. Now where can you find this? Only in meditation. When you go into the deepest levels of your being, there is no more meditation, there is no more experience, the mind is no more working upon you, though through the mind you have gone into those, shall we say, bottomless pits in yourself, into that eternity which is lying hidden inside. In that absolute samadhi, there is no more activity, there is no more mind, there is no more intellect, there is not even the body. Because it's wrong to say that you are inside your body. Inside your body, eternity does not exist. But yet it is inside. It's because in my heart. Therefore, the true infinity is the heart, not the purse, not the intelligence, not the intellect, not health, not wealth, not strength, but the heart.
Sahaj Marg promotes personal responsibility and a readiness to enter into commitments. This is a wedding in traditional Indian costume. Here the master is giving his blessing. The love between two lovers is often compared with a bond entered into by a disciple and the master. Love fulfills and inspires, but also brings pain and disappointment. Just as in a normal marriage, disciples sometimes have the feeling of having lost their freedom. But according to the wise, true freedom consists in giving up one's supposed freedoms in favor of a total freedom.
You see, there is freedom. Freedom applies to this world. The freedom to work, to act as you like, to do what you want, to live as you please. This is called the temporal freedom. A man goes to jail and comes out, he is said to be free. He may not be really free. He is only free from prison. Now the outside world may be a bigger prison for him. He doesn't know where to go, he cannot get a job, his wife has divorced him and married somebody else, his children hate him because he's coming out of jail, his friends don't want to see him. No, which is freedom? But you say this is freedom. This man is free. So what is freedom? It doesn't exist.
The writings of masters and mystics from every era point out that we remain caught up in this world of duality until we turn to spirituality. The problem is that almost none of them left an understandable, practical explanation of how to go about achieving this spiritual freedom. The Sahaj Marg system is based on the rediscovery of a centuries-old practice from the Upanishads, holy Indian texts, which makes possible the gradual spiritual development of the disciple.
After liberation, we have realization, and after realization, we have the possibility of merging with the source or the guru, you see. That is becoming one with him. Now this, you see, this is a funny thing. People are afraid of this merger. They think of a cup of water put into the ocean, about which Hinduism talks. And they say, but what happens to the water? But the water is there, isn't it? What happens to my breath when I breathe it out? It is there. It has not gone anywhere. So why are we afraid? So we should not be afraid. But we are afraid that we lose our identity, we are annihilated, we say. Extinct. It's wrong. Because there are liberated people, there are people who have achieved laya, as we call it in Sanskrit, who are still living here and working here, retaining their identity.
Of course, this wonderful spiritual possibility also has a practical aspect, namely the question of how a single master, who is, after all, also only a human being, can manage to guide tens of thousands of followers. To solve this problem, Lalaji, the master of Chari's master, ensured that with this method, certain disciples could be trained to take on part of the work. These disciples are called preceptors, and they can themselves offer an introduction and meditation to beginners. This is why there is a seminar once each year for the almost 800 preceptors from around the globe, for training, supervision, and the exchange of experience.
Le rôle du précepteur, c'est d'être une courroie de transmission par rapport à...
The role of a preceptor is to be a mediator for the master on the human level. That means that the master for us represents a perfect human being, who has realized the absolute.
qui a réalisé le
But
soi,
because the numbers of practitioners, of followers is increasing, it is difficult to have a personal contact with the spiritual master like it was before.
il est très difficile d'avoir un contact personnel, comme ça a été par le passé, avec le guide spirituel, avec le maître. Donc il a formé des personnes qui peuvent faire...
So he has trained some of us to do a part of his work, the transmission, the cleaning, and at the same time to explain the approach to spirituality, to the divine, in the human, direct way.
Et du divin d'une manière humaine, directe.
But the question arises as to whether an Indian system such as Sahaj Marg is at all practicable for people from the Western countries.
Non, je ne pense pas que le système soit indien. Je crois que nous avons affaire
No,
à
I don't think it's an Indian system. I believe that we are dealing with a universal system. It's for all. Its origin is Indian. But let's say the approach to the divine has been rediscovered in India, but it refers to the heart, and the heart is neither Indian nor Western. It belongs to the whole of humanity. The Christian mystics, for instance, have always referred to the heart.
Ils ont toujours fait appel au cœur.
What is it that moves these people to follow such a path which is so different, so still? What do they experience in meditation that is so much more intense, so much more fulfilling than anything that can be described? Many of them have searched for a long time and tried out a number of things. So why did they choose Sahaj Marg?
I felt this longing, and I didn't have any particular way of finding a real connection with this. And when I first had experience of Sahaj Marg, I immediately felt there was something very real, because I could feel something that wasn't to do with me coming into me.
How has Sahaj Marg changed her?
Very much softening. And I've also been involved in psychotherapy, and this has been much more fundamental change in myself. Much more fundamental change of all my worst patterns, I think, have been modified. Mostly I just think my own capacity to love has been much more.
If this meditation has such a fulfilling, enriching effect, why haven't more people started practicing this type of yoga? Why is it not everyone who wants to experience this wonder?
My feeling is that it's very hard for people to believe that it's possible to have such a system. It's very hard to receive. Very hard to have the idea that you can receive something as beautiful as this. And I think people really long for it, but they are terrified to actually hope, let alone believe that this could really be something for them.
The time of parting, whether after 2 weeks or 4 weeks, at some point the time together with the Master is over, and the things experienced while with him will be carried over into everyday life. Parting is the sometimes painful necessity that frees us from the past and opens the way for new advancement. Parting from people and places which have become dear, but also from old behaviors, from outmoded attitudes and patterns. Just as for the Master himself, the departure to the new world also means a parting from his own home. The United States of America, the land of seemingly unlimited possibilities, the dream of freedom and sheer unending expansion. Here many people rely on the things they can have, possess, accumulate. Here too people have begun to realize that mankind has reached the limits of the feasible. The euphoria came to an end, and the poverty can no longer be overlooked. Here, a few miles from Atlanta in the south of the US, people are also poor. There's no social security, no old age pensions, just a belief in Jesus Christ. This is the middle of the Bible Belt, America's most pious area. And just down the road, the Sahaj Marg mission acquired a sizable plot of ground for an ashram. On this, the day of inauguration, a tree is being planted, the symbol of a new beginning. In less than 1 year, the members of the mission have built a meditation center, complete with infrastructure to accommodate about 200 seminar participants. For our master, the US embodies a confrontation with a completely different, largely materialistic culture. The problems arising in a society are often those of increasingly lonely and isolated people whose lives are determined primarily by competition and existential fears. Questions that involve mainly psychological and partnership issues. What is wrong with the relationships? Why doesn't anything work anymore?
Why? Because people are not willing to put anything into the relationship, they only want to take out all the time. Killing the goose that lays the golden egg. You get married and you expect bliss. Have you given bliss? Have you ever tried to give to your partner in your marriage or in your relationship with somebody else, yourself? I'm not talking of the body, of course. That is freely given, freely received, and freely thrown away. What you do not give, you never get. This is the law in spirituality. Give before you can receive. Give a little, receive a little. Give more, get more. Give all, get all. No, we cannot play with human beings like we play with automobiles. See? We cannot use them and throw them back and say, I don't like this model, give me another one. We don't shop for human beings. They are not returnable objects. If a human being is not shoppable, how can you shop for God? How can you return him? Where will you put him back? I don't know if God says such a person should be shot. But you know, these are real questions you should ask yourself. From where will I get God? Where does he go when I don't need him? Can I ever send him away? He that is myself, the prime mover of my existence, without whom I cannot even breathe.
Children. That can be seen not only in this ashram in Jutland, the peninsula of Denmark. Children that grow up in an environment of spiritual harmony have much greater chances of developing into well-balanced, satisfied people.
Because by working for yourself,
This is why the children enjoy Charya's great affection. He seeks contact with them ever and again, including adolescents, as at this meeting in Denmark.
På den måde kan hele menneskehedens fremtid faktisk forandre sig.
you should not think that how can I change the world.
I skal ikke tænke på, hvad hjælper det, at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 forandrer verden. Det skal I ikke tænke på. Tænk på, at det kan lade sig gøre.
You are not going to change the world.
Det er ikke jer enkeltvis, der skal forandre verden.
But when you change, the world will change. So we should not have this funny idea that you are going to change the world or I am going to change the world. But it is a very real thing.
Men det er en virkelig ting.
Like when even one person changes,
At når bare en person forandrer sig,
the world changes in some way.
Chari spends about 4 months of every year traveling in the West: France, Denmark, Switzerland, Germany. The expenses for his travels are assumed by the individual centers because he wouldn't be able to afford these trips on his pension. The members of the mission contribute to cover these costs. A constant companion on his trips to the West is Jackie Baruch of Paris. But accompanying the master is more than just a nice trip. It is a constant and intensive learning experience.
First time I saw him, I had a strong feeling about that man. The human level, of course. I was not looking for a master or something like that. And when I saw him first, I had the feeling this is one man I can trust. In his eyes there was something truthful, and being all the time with him, you have to be yourself, otherwise you cannot stay. That is true. So you have to expose your défaut, your qualité, whatever it is, but you are yourself. Whatever is necessary for you, it will help you to develop the things. It will, I always felt his help. Even when he was tough with me, you know, I felt if he didn't say something at that moment, it was as if he has no consideration, you know. It's really a relation like a father can have with his son, with his daughter. It's the whole panoply of the family is in the picture.
Regardless of what kind of relationship a disciple has established to his external master, the human being, the challenge is to let fall the masks behind which we hide and to discover the master within ourselves, to become like a child again. It is the children to whom the future belongs. If we want to give them a future, and this is surely also the future of this planet, we have to respect their physical and their spiritual needs. Chari too includes his grandson Bhargav in his plans for the future, for example in the plans of the Madras ashram. But ashrams are certainly not child's play, because like the Sahaj Marg organization itself, the construction of ashrams is entirely dependent on donations. Why don't they charge any money?
I am tempted to say that should we ever charge, we would charge you 1,000,000 times more than the most expensive other systems existence, because that is its efficacy. But precisely for that reason we have no charge, because there can be no charge for such a system. You see, when a doctor gives you life, really when you are in danger of death and he pulls you out of that death and gives you life, are his fees sufficient to pay him for his service to you? It is to help him to live so that he can help another patient to be brought out of death like that. When Jesus Christ raised Lazarus out of the dead or from death, did he charge him a fee? When he cured the lepers, did he charge them a fee? So strictly, the ancient law in India is you cannot charge for these things. In fact, in India it is forbidden even to charge for teaching.
The secret is very simple. The Master teaches us that in this life we're all in the same boat. If we allow him to teach us how to row, then we will have a safe journey of evolution. But even if we accept him as the pilot, we ourselves still have to row in order to cross the sea of love.